Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Dr. Jamilah Mahmud, Executive Director, Sunway Centre for Planetary Health, Sunway University. Yang berbahagia Datuk Sri Mahadi bin Sheikh Ngah, Mayor of Kuala Lumpur, Kuala Lumpur City Council. Yang berbahagia Profesor Tan Sri Dr. Zakri Abdul Hamid, Chairman Artery Advisory. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Mazrura Sahani, Public Health Specialist Physician, Environmental and Occupational Epidemiology Division UKM. Town Planner Herlina Abdul Aziz, President for Malaysian of Social Impact Association MSIA, Mr. Shamsul Bahar Muhammad Noor, Malaysia Green Technology and Climate Change Centre, Mr. Kurt Garrigan, Chief of Sustainable Urban Development, Environment and Development Division UNSCAP. Welcome to the High Level Dialogue 3, and the topic for this session is Rethinking Health Ecosystem and Environment Sustainability. Without any delay, I would like to invite Mr. Shamsul Bahar Muhammad Noor from Malaysia Green Technology and Climate Change Centre to deliver his opening remarks. Please be invited.
Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Dr. Jamilah Mahmud, Yang Berusaha Penurul Hashim, CEO Urbanis, Tan Sri Datuk-Datuk, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. I am truly honoured to welcome all speakers and participants to the Malaysia Urban Forum 2021. We unquestionably need to be addressing matters pertaining environmental issues, specifically on raising awareness, information integration and management of environmental sustainability. Planetary health is our main agenda, and we certainly have to play our role in climate action programs and mitigating destructive yet impactful ways to curb the effects of climate change. Over the past decade, cities have experienced an unprecedented rate of exponential growth. More than 50% of the world's population live in urban areas, and in Malaysia, 77% are urbanites. The urban population contributed to more than 80% of the global economic activities by offering social mobility and economic prosperity to millions of people by clustering creative, innovative, and educated individuals and organizations. Clustering population and communities, however, can compound to both positive and negative conditions, with many modern urban areas experiencing growth inequality. The United Nations have stated that uncontrollable development will threaten cities with social conflict, environmental degradation, and perhaps the collapse of basic services. The whole ecosystem of health will be affected. The nation will be affected, and we will be affected. We all know that economic development and environmental protection are interdependent and mutually reinforcing components of sustainable development. The economic, social, and environmental planning practices of societies embodying urban sustainability have been proposed as solutions to the negative urban trends. Urban sustainability is a doctrine with diverse origin. Global GHG emission must be reduced to the same level as natural absorption capacity as early as possible. Identifying actual measures to reduce GHG emission is as important as agreeing to goals and sharing recognitions. Transforming the current eco-economic structure to achieve low-carbon societies is essential for our sustainable future. In addition to technological innovation, we need innovation in our lifestyle and social infrastructure. There is a need to have this balance. The COVID pandemic has both its downside and upside, both blessing and a curse. We know how COVID-19 affects our lives, our loved ones, and the way we evolve our way of lives. However, it is a blessing in a sense that it gives us enough reason and opportunity to think about planetary health and revisit some of the implementation and policies touching the agenda of environmental sustainability. The only way to achieve our objective is to establish policy and action with clear direction and transparent methods that everyone accepts. In today's event, Sustainable Urban Nation 2030, Better Cities for All with COVID-19 is a great platform to discuss these methods. We'll be having definitive solutions on environmental policies such as climate change, air quality infrastructure, and etc. The planetary health is not a responsibility of the specific entities. It is a compounded effort and continuous action from all walks of life. The session on rethinking health, ecosystem, and environmental sustainability will further foster collaboration and intellectual discussion between government agencies, business, and civil societies around Malaysia and within the region. I'm also glad to see that the topic on overall health ecosystem and environmental sustainability is being considered in more detail at this session. And I hope with greater consensus and outcome which can be further implemented for the betterment of the nation. I wish all of you every success in this conference, and I do hope the outcome will be a move forward on environmental policies and ensure that they are thoroughly integrated into other national and international policies and perhaps further arrangement for funding. Thank you, and on with the conference.
Thank you, Mr. Shamsul Baha, for that speech. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor to invite Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Dr. Jamilah Mahmud, Executive Director, Sunway Centre for Planetary Health, Sunway University, to deliver her keynote address. Please be invited, Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Dr.
Assalamualaikum, organizers. I cannot hear anything.
Tan Sri, can you hear me now? But we can hear you, Tan Sri. Can you hear me now?
I can now hear you.
Okay. Please be invited to deliver your keynote address, Tan Sri.
Assalamualaikum. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm sorry for the technical glitch. And I'm really excited that we are finally talking about the intersection between health as well as urbanization, energy, sustainability, and so on and so forth. For too long, health has been in a silo. So allow me to share a couple of slides where I will walk you through what we see as opportunities for us. Can we have the slides up? Great. So how do we rethink health ecosystems and environmental sustainability, including that of the built environment? Can we move to the next slide, please? If we look at the current situation around the world, including in ours, is this also giving us a glimpse into the future? We live in a very crowded planet. Close to 8 billion people will be living on our planet. We are in Malaysia also facing an aging population, and the majority of our people by 2030 will be above 65 years old. We are growing in that cohort of elderly people are actually a growing cohort. We've seen increased climate risks, not just in terms of increasing flash floods and climate events, but we're also living in a hotter world. And the IPCC report, the call for the red, a code red for humanity, is something that also applies to us. In the health system, as we look at it, we're also seeing a lot more patient-doctor disconnect. We're seeing a rise in digitalization and a demand for personalized health. But these, to me, are opportunities. Moving forward, please. Now, we look at Southeast Asia, it is really a climate and health hotspot. And one of the things that I keep saying to a lot of people during the time in the last 1.5 years with the pandemic is that, you know, the climate crisis doesn't pause when there's a pandemic. So what is happening much more now is we're getting colliding threats. You have the threats of the pandemic happening at the same time with climate events as well. If we look at Southeast Asia where we live, it is really the climate and health hotspot. You know, often for us working in disasters, we always say that Indonesia is the supermarket for disasters, a fantastic laboratory, and Philippines is a 7-Eleven. So Malaysia is fortunate that we are surrounded by these Pacific ring of fire countries and a little bit shielded. But more and more we're seeing, for example, in Sabah, where I am now, they have experienced some earthquakes, although mild. We are seeing much more hydrometeorological disasters, and these all have impacts on health as well. Next, please. Now, if we look at infectious disease outbreaks, Southeast Asia is also the hotspot. Over the last 2 decades, we have seen many more of these infectious diseases rising. For those of us who worked on pandemics and epidemics, you know, we're often quite disappointed in ourselves as well as in systems where we've not taken the warning signs seriously. We always knew it was a question of when and not if till we have another pandemic. We've had MERS, we've had SARS-CoV, we have Nipah virus, we have H1N1, avian flu, every single little virus that has affected us, but we should have known that a pandemic was arising, and yet many of us were caught unprepared around the world. So, and I mentioned earlier about the colliding threats. It makes things worse. Next. Now, at the same time, and very relevant to this conference is, as the previous speaker mentioned, that more than 50% of the world's mega cities are in Asia, and Malaysia itself is one that is developed. Urbanization is rapidly developing, and with that comes all the challenges but also opportunities of city development and city living. And all this is happening at the same time together with not just population growth, but sometimes population decline in some parts of Asia. Next. So how does this then lead to, you know, the challenges that I mentioned before? Unsustainable urbanization, for example, pollution of the air, water, and land have all got costs to it. And it's got costs not just in terms of economic costs, but it also has costs to health. Next, please. Now, when we talk about health, most of you will think that, okay, health is about me falling sick and going to hospital. And that's what we call the medical care complex, where you have a system of patient-doctor relationships, institutional care, and so on and so forth. But health writ large is actually created outside the medical care system. So if you look at that creation of health, only 20% of health is from the medical care complex. 5% may be genetic, but the majority of health is created as a result of social and environmental factors, as well as behavioral factors. So if we are going to tackle health and really tackle health from a systems perspective, it requires us to look at it from all these angles, and therefore you will agree, I'm sure, that health requires an all of systems approach. We've seen this very acutely in the management of the pandemic crisis of late. We've seen how if the pandemic management is not done well, the impact on social and economic the social and economic impact is extremely high. Next, please. So if you look at climate change that I mentioned is probably one of the largest determinants of our future health. And you will see, it's a little bit of a crowded slide, that at every part of the climate change chain, there are health impacts. And these include a range of issues, from a rise in infectious diseases, from mental health issues, respiratory illnesses, obesity, and so on and so forth. Next. So let's get back to what we do. I think it's all about our actions. If we take into consideration what I said before about, 25 or 20% of that health complex is where the medical care is, then how do we then, ensure that as we move forward, we take into consideration all those determinants, put them through a lens where we filter it down to see how that impact is created, and therefore what systemic changes needs to be done. This requires planning, both at the highest level, but also really in Malaysia, looking at it from the economic planning to our financial planning, looking at risk management, looking at economic development, looking at sustainability, looking at opportunities for business, and of course, health and social factors. Next, please. So let me introduce this concept of planetary health, and I'm very proud to be the founding executive director of the Sunway Center for Planetary Health. And what it is that in the health agenda, we've had things like public health, you would have heard, you have had animal health. The United Nations at one stage mentioned One Health, the intersection between public and animal health, and then eco health. But planetary health is even broader than that. It's an encompassing agenda for health, which means that you cannot have human health without planet health. Yesterday was very historic. 200 over journals, or medical and health journals, published in their editorials a call for us to recognize the intersection between health and climate and planet health. And I think that this is going to be the future of health. How do we look at it from a very broad systems perspective, that without a planetary health approach, we will have severe impacts, not just on health, but social and economic determinants of health as well. Next, please. So what do we learn from this pandemic? What are the opportunities we find from this crisis that we've been through? All of us know that crisis is made of two words in the Mandarin alphabets. It is crisis and danger, but also opportunity. And if you look at the cost of preventing the next pandemic, it's only 2% of the COVID bill that the world has spent now, which means from now on, all of us in this meeting must start rethinking how we approach not just making our country a safer place, but also preventing that next pandemic. And this is precisely what the Sunway Center for Planetary Health is planning to do, to work with others to figure this out. Next. Now, I love this slide. It's one of my favorite slides, because sometimes the nature of humans is we focus on what is ahead of us immediately, and we don't take 10 steps back to look at what is really ahead of us in the future. And I call upon all of us to really have a much more futures and foresight approach to our planning, to our thinking, to our strategy development, and look ahead at what do we need to do now. You may think that washing our hands and wearing a mask and getting the vaccines will get us out of trouble. But behind us, we already see recession in many countries. We know the impact of the climate crisis, but also biodiversity collapse. It's already starting to happen. This morning, I spoke about the planetary boundaries, the 9 planetary boundaries, and Malaysia is not doing very well in this area. So we really need to buck up. So I thought I'd give you a little teaser this morning about why a planetary health approach makes sense to not just urban development and urban planning, the future of our cities, the future of our social and economic constructs, but also our future health. So I really look forward to us working together and to figure out how do we develop a planetary health roadmap that is applicable to all systems and all sectors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tan Sri Dr. Jamil. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we would like to invite the moderator of this session, Mr. Kurt Garrigan, the Chief of Sustainable Urban Development, Environment and Development Division, UNSCAP. The floor is yours, Mr. Garrigan.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the kind introduction. It's very interesting having listened to the two previous speakers that the context and the all of the background for this panel discussion has been laid out extremely well. What are some of the issues that relate to health, the links to urbanization, the links to climate change, the links to inequality and social and environmental issues. So I think this is going to be a very robust discussion. And let me first thank the previous speakers, Dr. Jamila Mahmood for the keynote address, and Shamsul for the opening remarks. Again, they really did lay the groundwork for an interesting discussion this morning. Let me introduce first the panel here, and we'll ask each of them for their interventions. I know we're a little bit behind schedule, so we'll go right to the panel. The first speaker is the Mayor of Kuala Lumpur, Dr. Sri Mahadi bin Nga, and he will be followed by Professor Tan Sri Dr. Zachary Abdul Hamid, who's the chairman of ATRI Advisory. We'll then hear from Professor Dr. Mazrura Sahani, who's a public health specialist and physician with the Occupational Epidemiology Division at UKM, followed by town planner Herlina Ab Aziz, who's the president of the Malaysian Social Impact Association. Then we'll follow their interventions with discussion and Q&A, and hopefully we can take some questions from the floor. And I'll ask each of the panelists to reflect really on what they've heard this morning and over the course of this Malaysian Urban Forum. But first, let me turn over to the Mayor of Kuala Lumpur. Dr. Sri, your intervention, please. Over to you.
Introduction.
You're still, okay. Please proceed.
Is that okay?
Yes, good.
Consistency, Dato', tuan-tuan and puan-puan, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good morning to one and all. I would like to extend my appreciation to our host, Urbanis, for organizing the Malaysia Urban Forum today. The World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 outbreak as a public health emergency of international concern. Since then, as we are all aware, the virus has indeed invaded our lives. Malaysia's capital, Kuala Lumpur, is no exception. We will continue to live in the new norm for the foreseeable future with current measures to curb the spread of the virus, remaining part and parcel of our everyday lives. The COVID-19 is highly infectious with rapid human-to-human transmission and the potential of cases suffering long incubation periods. As Mayor of Kuala Lumpur, I am particularly cautious that the risk of the disease spreading is significantly greater in cities with high population densities, given that it is difficult to control population movement, making it almost impossible to cut off virus transmission. Consequently, this affects the urban system as a whole tremendously. With a growing population of 1.8 million, that is expected to hit the 2.5 million mark by 2040, Kuala Lumpur is especially vulnerable to this risk. Malaysia has adopted the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or in short SDGs, as part of a global action plan to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. These SDGs, which aim to make cities more resilient, have become especially relevant in combating COVID-19. Of course, in order to achieve these goals, the implementation of SDGs must be localized to fit the needs of all KLIs. In line with this, Kuala Lumpur City Hall has undertaken
It appears that we may have lost the mayor. Is the connection gone? I don't see the mayor listed as a speaker. Apologies, everyone, for the technical difficulties. If I could ask the technical colleagues to work with the mayor's office, try to get him back, and maybe we could proceed to the next speaker and then come back. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that would be great, Garrigan.
Okay, thank you. So let me introduce again the chairman of the ATRI Advisory, Professor Tan Sri, Dr. Zakri Abdul Hamid. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for giving me the floor. Let me start by congratulating the Urbanist Malaysia for convening this forum. I think it's very appropriate. And right off the bat, I wanted to say that this approach is one of the effective ways of getting to actions at the next level. What I meant is the fact that this is a dialogue among various stakeholders, not only the experts, the scientists, but more importantly, linking with the policymakers and the politicians. As we know, today's global challenges, which translate into national and local challenges, needs a multi-sectoral approach. As Tan Sri Jamila mentioned in her keynote, we need that kind of concerted effort, interaction between ministries, between different government agencies, the policymakers and the politicians, and also the business sector. I think we also need to stress the point that all this should also be guided by a committed political will among our leaders. It starts from the top. Now, the problem has been outlined very well by the two previous speakers. All I need to say that this problem is not going to go away, and it needs a lot of interaction. It's not something that we don't know. For instance, even before COVID-19, in a country like Malaysia, I think in 1999, 1998, 1999, we were faced with the problem of the Nipah virus, which is almost similar to what we are having now, of course, with less catastrophic impact. And as again, let me quote my dear friend Tan Sri Jamila, this pandemic has been known, but how much action do we need? I'm very concerned, and I like to encourage this dialogue between the expert or scientists with the policymakers. I say this with my own experience as a science advisor to the Prime Minister at one time, and also involved in two mega processes. One is the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which was done in 2001, 2005. I was the co-chair. This is sanctioned by the United Nations. And in this report, we say 60% of the ecosystem services and biodiversity on the face of the earth is threatened with destruction, 60%. And it was followed, I think 2 years ago, the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, of which I was the founding chair. And in that report, we say 1 million species of flora and fauna is being threatened by extinction. So in other words, we know the problem, we know what it is, and increasingly there's a heightened awareness about this, but we are not taking action. So that is the reason why I like this kind of approach, the multi-sectoral, multi-ministerial approach, in which all of us could work together and focus. And with respect to urban issues, I think we have heard before how nature, how the environment, how climate change would impact on life in the cities. So it's incumbent upon all of us to take concerted and collaborative actions. Maybe my 5 minutes are the over, Chair. Let me conclude for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri Dr. Sakri. Very much appreciated your comments, and you again have highlighted the point that we cannot separate urban issues from nature, environment, and climate change. They are actually interrelated, and the decisions that are made in urban areas obviously have impact for rural areas, and the same. So I was also very much appreciated your initial comment that many of these issues need to be guided by a committed political will. And I think we see that certainly in Malaysia to address these issues, including through forums like these. I think we do have the mayor of Kuala Lumpur back. Is that correct, Dr. Sri Mahadi? If you want to reconnect, and the floor is again yours. Would you like to finish your intervention? I believe the mayor is muted. Okay, if we could ask the technical colleagues to continue working with the mayor, let us move on then to Professor Dr. Mazura Sahani, Public Health Specialist Physician, Environmental and Occupational Epidemiology Division at UKM. Doctor, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Kurt. Assalamualaikum and good morning. Thank you for inviting me. Please let me share my slide. Can you see my slide?
We can. If you could make it full screen, please. That would be.
Sorry.
Yes. If you can make it. Yes. Please proceed. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm a public health specialist from the Faculty of Health Sciences, UKM. Let me share with you the public health perspective for sustainable, healthy, and green cities. We need to have green spaces in our urban living. We know that green spaces are important to support healthy living in urban areas, we know that green spaces promote relaxation, restoration, and improve our immune system and enhance physical activity, which can improve our mental health and reduce cardiovascular mortality and morbidity. The cardiovascular mortality and morbidity is one of our top causes of death and morbidity in the country. But when we talk about green, it's not about natural green by trees and plants around. We are talking also about green in low carbon cities. Ladies and gentlemen, what do we have when we talk about urban living? We have goods, transport, and we created a lot of waste. With low carbon cities, we are talking about new building, efficient transport system, and also being green in managing our environment, our waste especially. I'm happy to share some of my experiences in most of these sectors, in building, transport, and waste sectors, that we could reap the co-benefits of being in low carbon society. For example, with electric vehicles growth projection for 2040, we could reduce air pollution, and prevent death, which is estimated to save the health cost of maximum of about 9 billion ringgit a year. Ladies and gentlemen, in urban living, we do not have much time. Climate change is happening. We need to prioritize our action in the new urban agenda that integrate health into urban planning. We must work together across sectors, especially protecting vulnerable population. For example, in my latest research under UNICEF, we look into the well-being of children in relation to climate change, and also taking into account the pandemic COVID. One of the issues that raised in our urban poor setting, as the children are stuck in small confined spaces during MCO. We also we must not reinvent the wheels. We must share our expertise and develop necessary skills for capacity building in public system for new urban agenda. Finally, what we need right now is to have health in all policies that require all different sectors working together. And what's next for our urban, sustainable, healthy cities? We need also to prepare our cities for the worst case scenario to be disaster resilience. We need to establish the disaster resilient cities. For example, in my involvement with the EPU project for the route map transformation for the water sector transformation 2040, I'm in the task force of climate change impact and adaptation. For public health, we need to strengthen the understanding of climate change and health nexus in instituting disaster resilient cities by expanding the existing program of low carbon cities. I think we need to come together and work together for our best Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention and highlighting the role of low carbon and disaster resilient cities. It's also interesting that you highlighted the kind of the systems approach that our keynote speaker also mentioned, that it's an all of government, all systems approach that integrates health and urban planning in an equitable manner. I think we do have the mayor of Kuala Lumpur reconnected. And so if I could invite him to continue his remarks. Dr. Sri Mahadi, please. I don't hear audio. Mayor, I think you may be muted still. If you could unmute your microphone, please.
Microphone.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, very well. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Sorry for the technical glitch. Tansi, Dato', tuan-tuan dan perempuan, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. I would like to start from the beginning again. The World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 outbreak as a public health emergency of international concern. Since then, as we are all aware, the virus has indeed invaded our lives. Malaysia's capital, Kuala Lumpur, is no exception. We will continue to live in the new norm for the foreseeable future with current measures to curb the spread of the virus remaining part and parcel of our everyday lives. The COVID-19 is highly infectious with rapid human-to-human transmission and the potential of cases suffering long incubation periods. As Mayor of Kuala Lumpur, I am particularly cautious that the risk of the disease spreading is significantly greater in cities with high population densities, given that it is difficult to control population movement, making it almost impossible to cut off virus transmission. Consequently, this affects the urban system as a whole tremendously. With a growing population of 1.8 million, that is expected to hit the 2.5 million mark by 2040, Kuala Lumpur is especially vulnerable to this risk. Malaysia has adopted the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or in short SDGs, as part of a global action plan to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. These SDGs, which aim to make cities more resilient, have become especially relevant in combating COVID-19. Of course, in order to achieve these goals, the implementation of SDGs must be localized to fit the needs of all KLIs. In line with this, Kuala Lumpur City Hall has undertaken several measures to develop a healthier ecosystem within the city. Under SDG 3, which promotes the good health and well-being of KLIs, we have implemented social distancing measures in both new and existing locations. For new congregation sites and buildings such as community halls, places of worship, hawker centers, sport complexes, and public parks, new guidelines are being drawn to be issued to all stakeholders and project owners. With this alignment, we are able to ensure that social distancing elements are factored into the opening and daily operations of these public spaces. On the other hand, existing buildings are required by City Hall to be retrofitted with facilities that allow for adequate social distancing. In addition to social distancing, a key initiative that we have undertaken is providing support in the form of sanitization equipment and training to the Public Housing Residents Association, who are required to sanitize their compounds 3 times a week. These areas are all the more susceptible, and as such, our priority is to ensure this particular segment of KLIs are indeed protected to the best of our abilities. Kuala Lumpur City Hall has also worked with the Fire and Rescue Department and Alam Flora to sanitize community hotspots such as housing areas, schools, government offices, markets, and places of worship. These efforts, together with restriction of movement at high-density areas such as the People's Public Housing Project or public housing, and the federal government's movement control order, enable us to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission. In achieving our SDG goal of good health and well-being for the city, we must also remain cognizant of vulnerable groups who are at greater risk of infection. For example, the elderly face great challenges in reaching clinics and vaccination centers. To address this, Kuala Lumpur City Hall has initiated the My Medic program, which helps in mobilizing medical treatment and vaccination for those who need it most. The mobile vaccination centers are provided in 65 public housing areas and wholesale market. Ladies and gentlemen, by working toward the Sustainable Development Goals, which focus on eradicating poverty and hunger while ensuring quality education and a sustainable city for all, we are able to safeguard the health and well-being of the homeless amidst the pandemic. Under the protection of our community halls that have been converted into temporary shelters, the basic needs of the homeless are now fulfilled through basic health screenings, general health treatments, vaccinations, and daily meals provided through a centralized food bank. We have witnessed for ourselves how the homeless at our Anjung Kelana Homeless Transit Center have since taken up urban farming. They are now able to plant and harvest crops on their own. Ladies and gentlemen, we are cognizant that COVID-19 has had a hard-hitting impact on the global economy and a good number of airlines. This has been particularly evidenced in Kuala Lumpur with the shutdown of the tourism and construction industries for extended periods of time. With these economic hurdles, many who were once financially comfortable are struggling to make ends meet. As such, underscoring SDG 10 to reduce inequality, Kuala Lumpur City Hall has implemented various economic initiatives to aid all segments of society, be it the B40, M40, or T20. We are leaving no one behind. We waive monthly rental fees for all Kuala Lumpur City Hall public housing residents and hawker center tenants for a period of 6 months. On top of that, 41,182 families were provided cash subsidies. We have also eased the process of doing business for small traders by widening free trade zones in the city under the KI Cares initiative. Under this initiative, traders can apply for business licenses online and obtain approval within 3 days. Ladies and gentlemen, due to movement restrictions that have come hand in hand with the pandemic, we have seen a sharp acceleration in digitalization. In our day-to-day operations, we have shifted all our meetings, discussions, and even local engagement sessions online. As the COVID-19 pandemic sweeps the world, real estate professionals across the world have begun advocating the use of the cutting-edge technology. Several companies are pioneering technology to allow for touchless building interaction, such as using voice-activated lifts or elevators. Beyond our work, the world of e-commerce has witnessed a huge surge in demand for a variety of goods ranging from ready-to-use to food items. Consequently, there has been a considerable increase in e-hailing services. As the authority for the nation's capital, we are duty-bound to ensure that the city grows despite these challenges currently, and this will be primarily in the area of ensuring the right infrastructure is in place, both hardware and software. Bearing this in mind, Kuala Lumpur City Hall now provides dedicated parking spots for e-hailing services, which aim to both help businesses on the move as well as protect road users and pedestrians. In accordance with SDG 17, Kuala Lumpur City Hall understands the value of forming partnership in developing the city for the benefit of its citizens. This has been particularly evidenced throughout the pandemic, which has required numerous agencies, associations, and NGOs to work together to address the needs of Malaysia. One such partnership that Kuala Lumpur City Hall has undertaken is the Urban Farming Program, which involves Persatuan Lestari Alam Malaysia and Taman Desa Residents Association. With initiatives like this that bring together different key players in society, we are confident that Kuala Lumpur is on the right track to becoming a resilient and sustainable city for all. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, despite the fact that COVID-19 has impacted all of us, its long-term consequences are still yet to be felt. Nevertheless, mankind has always thrived throughout centuries, no matter the challenges. And I am certain that the post-pandemic days will bring about new and positive developments. This will call upon authorities such as Kuala Lumpur City Hall to be more creative and innovative in finding long-term solutions to combat this pandemic and future ones. What is imperative is that we must have resilience, innovations, and heart to ensure that we create a healthier ecosystem for all KLIs. Once again, Tan Sri, Datuk-Datuk, Tuan-Tuan, and Puan-Puan, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to share our views. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Back to you, Kak.
Mayor, thank you. Thank you very much for an inspiring presentation. Thanks for highlighting the Sustainable Development Goals and the framework to localize SDGs as a means to assist cities in developing strategies, both for recovery and for sustainable urbanization. You highlighted many of the innovations that KL is putting into place, both in response to, but also despite the pandemic. And many of these solutions provide the basis for building back better strategies and to build urban resilience and have lessons for other cities, not just in Malaysia, but across the Asia Pacific region. I think also, just let me also thank you for your leadership in developing some urban innovations, including on plastic pollution that you're working on with SCAP through the Closing the Loop project. So thank you again for your intervention. We'll come back in the discussion. Hopefully we'll have some questions for you, but much appreciated your presentation. Let's move on now to Town Planner Herlina Aziz, President of Malaysian Social Impact Association, for her intervention. Town Planner Herlina, over to you, please. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me well?
Very well. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Your Excellencies, fellow panelists, distinguished guests, friends, and everyone following this online forum. Good morning, or maybe this is not morning anymore. Okay, firstly, as the President of the Malaysian Association of Social Impact Assessment, I'm honored to be given the opportunity to share my thoughts in this forum. Thank you,
Madam Herlina? It appears as though we've lost her connection. While the technical staff works to get Town Planner Herlina back, maybe we can proceed into some of the Q&A and follow up. Let me first ask a general question, and as all the speakers can come back and reflect. I would like to know how the fundamental role of ecosystems is being brought into urban planning and supporting healthy and sustainable development. More explicitly, how is it being addressed in the planning and development processes in your communities? Let me first ask Professor Tansri, Dr. Zachary, where do you see ecosystem health being integrated in planning efforts?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a very important point. One of the obvious reasons that we can illustrate is the COVID-19. This is, according to reliable research and report, is caused by destruction of wildlife habitat. And this aspect factored in needs to be factored in our planning, even in urban areas, in the sense these natural resources need to be taken into consideration. Also, even if we are talking about housing, urban development, and all that, and if I may just get off tangent a bit, Kurt, this is very important, and this is where consultative democratic process involving multi-sectors, multi-group is so essential. Case in point in Malaysia is the ongoing debate or controversy about the Kuala Langat forest reserve, where we see some infringement of decision making. I don't have to dwell into it, but such kind of interaction is very important when we talk about planning ahead for our urban areas, where someone said no one is left behind, in the sense that all sectors of society need to be heard of. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Sahani, if I could ask you essentially the same question. You highlighted very well in your presentation the role of green spaces, urban green spaces. How do we connect the planning for these urban green spaces to the broader ecosystems in urban and rural areas? Over to you, please.
Yeah, I think if we could plan in terms, especially for urban green spaces, that means we need to preserve our trees for every development. For every development, we hope that we could figure out how to not cut our trees. That's part of it, and also because we need the green spaces for our society to have space for recreation and also relaxation. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, did I answer that? Sorry.
Yes, thank you very much. And we'll return now to Town Planner Herlina, who will hopefully indicate how, more specifically in urban planning, these principles can be enhanced. So Town Planner Herlina, are you back with us?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, please continue your presentation.
Sorry.
Apologies for the technical difficulties.
Okay. I guess my slides, can you put back my slides? Okay. As I mentioned earlier, this is the right forum to discuss solutions for the increasing challenges that we are facing today towards sustainable urban nation 2030. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, if the Health Ministry
It seems we've had another disconnect. Planner Helena, are you with us? Okay. If not, let me quickly follow up with the mayor on a question for him. You mentioned quite well the SDGs and how localization of the SDGs is really playing a part in how Kuala Lumpur is both addressing the pandemic and developing strategies for the future. How do you see the SDGs interlinking with the health ecosystem, environmental sustainability overall? We heard from our keynote speaker this systems approach. How are you taking a systems approach and then working, especially with across many stakeholders, to address these specific issues, health, ecosystem, and environmental sustainability? Please.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I think if I can touch a little bit on this urban ecosystem. At the moment, Kuala Lumpur City Hall is also looking at or very seriously implementing low carbon initiative, low carbon society initiative. We are looking at this as a whole ecosystem. Why we need to have the low carbon? To us in Kuala Lumpur, low carbon means cleaner air. Low carbon address the issues of the global warming or climate change. So we have actually, sorry to be a little bit long in giving the answer, we have actually selected one growth center in Kuala Lumpur, Wan Semaju, to have our pilot for the implementation of the low carbon programs. So by having, and we also set the target that this center by 2050 must be carbon neutral growth center. So by having this vision, we are getting everyone to understand it. We do a lot of engagement. We have talked to the local residents to have to change their lifestyle by adopting a new low carbon lifestyle. If you are of that state, you now must be very eager to implement things like having solar panel on your rooftop, or you would like to walk more than drive your own car, or you probably want to cycle. By doing all this, it's actually making you more healthy. On top of that, you pay less cost. You incur less cost in your life. In Wan Semaju, we are also implementing soon electric buses. This is a free ride bus service that go around the center to pick them up, to bring them to the nearest public transport station. We're going to have the first electric bus introduced in this center by this coming October, if I'm not mistaken. So you do that, then more people in Wan Semaju now would take public transport to come to the city center or to come to work. And on top of that, we are also doing 12 kilometers bicycle track, and for the pedestrian to walk from Wan Semaju right to the city center. It's actually quite near, 12 kilometers. So if they can use these facilities, and the facility will be ready, I think, in another probably 1 more year. We have got the phase 1 and phase 2 ready. Yet then we are competing it for phase 3 and phase 4. So if they have got this, then I hope people will be more induced or attracted to do more exercise.
Okay.
This in a total Semaju will be a new center that the people there having a better life, more healthier, and of course safer and all that.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're rejoined by Town Planner Alina. So let me try again and turn the floor over to her.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Kurt.
No worries.
Garrigan. Yeah, I'm so sorry that. Okay, let me continue with my case examples. If you can have my second slide on, I'll just switch off my video so that it won't interrupt the line. Okay, my second slide shows the case in southern Johor, where we see massive reduction of coastal mangroves, which have been traditional site of the Orang Selatan for thousands of years. Such reclamation development is done so that the urban rich can settle in nice gated residences facing the seafront. When Singapore left in 1965, the Orang Selatan community chose to settle in the Malaysian side of Tebrau Straits, believing that their traditional livelihood would be preserved. Unfortunately, today, their traditional way of life and coastal habitat is heavily degraded and even polluted by insensitive development. Mr. Chairman, the reef and seagrass meadows that provide the necessary habitats for sea life that to thrive have been vanished due to massive coastal reclamation. And this is evident as the fish, crabs, and other seafood that the Orang Selatan harvest for their family sustenance and income have reduced drastically. Sadly, 80% of Orang Asli Selatan community in Kuala Masai was also found positive, with some run for the woods over fear of COVID-19 just recently. Although not alarming and still under control, the pandemic had added hardship to their livelihood. And as you all are aware, the pressure of reclamation projects for urban developments are pretty intense in all other parts of our country. Thus, we need to be extra careful not to repeat the same mistake again. I go to my third slide. Mr. Chairman, these slides showing the satellite image in Lojing Highlands, Kelantan. It is no secret that the massive deforestation has occurred in the name of agriculture development. As you can see from the satellite data, the lodging landscape has already been damaged at a massive scale from the forest loss on year-to-year basis. The local rural and indigenous communities on the highlands are struggling with ruined watershed and murky rivers that offer little fish food and potable water. I hope Malaysians will never forget the tsunami-like big yellow flood of Kelantan in 2014, with 200 million losses affecting 202,000 of victims. The flood showed high content of wood debris and muds. It appears that such destruction is systematic because the deforestation and floods happen repeatedly and continuously on yearly basis. And this, for some, it is only God to be blamed. We see the aspirations of sustainable development is totally ignored here due to the greed of some. And I hope COVID-19 teaches how wildlife exploitation and habitat loss can fuel pandemic risk from zoonotic disease. And as a social impact assessment professional, I feel sad for the communities living in Lojing Highland and pray for the safety of Rakyat Kelantan. My next slide, the fourth slide is on North Langat Forest Reserve. This is last but not least, the recent public outcry with regards to the degazettement of North Kuala Langat Forest Reserve, despite numerous objections and petitions by the public. is a classic case of how expansion of urban development is affecting the marginalized communities. The last piece of Kuala Langat forest was the only patch of remaining forest left for the indigenous communities, as many more was earlier degazetted for urban development. Sadly, from our prior SIA study, we found out that the said Orang Asli community has been repeatedly displaced and the said forest was once promised to be left untouched. We are thankful that the news has reported that the degazettement is now put on hold, and we welcome such a move. If the degazettement is to go ahead, the indigenous communities would certainly lose their last piece of traditional ancestral land and their way of life. And the next slide, please. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, social impact comes in many forms. They can be linked to the economy, cultural, as well as the environment. Most often, the impacts are caused by urbanization factors. Malaysia has great policy plans to drive it forward sustainably. We need to ensure it is sincerely benefits the people in the implementation at local level. With better access to technology and impact assessment methods, we aim to use our knowledge to ensure all projects are rigorously assessed for social impacts. Knowing the communities may be systematically displaced in some developments, we shall do our best to offer solutions and recommendations. In closing, I invite all to join us in our quest by constantly asking and reflecting whether a particular project is development or destruction. We clearly need to be more sensitive towards the small and marginalized communities, the ecosystem which are the community's identity, and the environment on land, watershed, and sea, which is the source of livelihood for the communities. I would ask us all to let us walk our own talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Town Planner Helena. Let me start with a follow-up question so that we can continue with you. If you would, elaborate a little bit more on what are the policy implications of the threats that the ecosystem changes that you've illustrated. You had a slide that showed the deforestation. What are those threats? What are those implications for health specifically? We also see in the chat a good discussion about citizens being disconnected from nature as urbanization continues. From a town planning perspective, what specific policy interventions need to be brought forward or strengthened that look at ecosystems? And then if you could, what are those implications specifically for health?
Thank you, Mr. Garrigan, for the questions. As I mentioned, our policies are already well in place. We have the structure plans of the states. We have even national physical plan that says that we have to conserve our forests, especially our permanent forests. But unfortunately, in some areas, especially on the highlands, we are also looking at another policy saying that we encourage highland agriculture. So you can see that since we have too many policies, sometimes that between the two policies has already been some conflict. So I think what we need to really see which one is more important than the other. So basically, as I mentioned, the policies are already in place. What we need to do is to make the implementer or the politician at state level to really walk their talk and to really sincerely implement what national policy plans are talking about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just another follow-up. SCAP, about a year ago after when the pandemic was first emerging, did some research and looked at various policy pathways. One of the recommendations was that urban and territorial planning specifically could be used as a spatial vaccine if done well, and that health-related targets could be better integrated into urban planning processes. What is your view on how to integrate health-related targets in those basic or fundamental planning processes?
To me, it is very straightforward. When we are talking about health, we are talking about drinking water. We are talking about air. We are talking about our environment, that where we live in. It is very straightforward if we can actually take care of those very important components of our livelihood at the local levels. We don't need grand policies to keep on telling us this is what we need to do. Just it's very important to respect the need of the locals in the policy plan, the need of putting social implications beyond the grids from economic development. This is how I see as a professional on social impact assessment.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sahani, if I could ask you to also come in on essentially the same question, the policy implications of health and planning, and how to maybe integrate health targets more effectively in planning processes.
Thank you, Kurt. How to integrate, sorry, can you repeat your question?
How to better integrate health and possibly health targets in urban planning. We just heard that obviously clean water, clean air are elements of that. Are there any from a public health standpoint that you would focus on?
Okay. I think we have a lot of findings from our scientific studies that has shown that, for example, air pollution could lead to respiratory and cardiovascular death. And for some of these scenario, we could also show that when we improve the air pollution, we can reduce the mortality and morbidity of our public. So that means we have enough scientific evidence to show that when we improve the air quality or even water quality, we could protect our community. Does it answer your question?
Yes, very well. Thank you very much. Maybe if I could turn now to Professor Dr. Zachary. And this, let me ask you a question about corporate social responsibility. I think you addressed very, very well, the overall implications. But if we're talking about some of the development that is occurring in cities being done by private development, how do you see corporate social responsibility contributing to responsible business practices, to more sustainable urbanization, to protection of health and conservation of ecosystems?
Thank you, Chair. That's a very good point. In fact, it's not only how. In fact, it's one of the main factor to be solved, and that is the involvement of the corporate sector and their CSR. One case in point in Malaysia, if you recall, a very recent issue about the pollution of the Sungai Kim Kim in Johor, that's almost due to the infringement of the private sector, the industries there. So they have a very heavy responsibility. One is the responsibility itself, but also the arms of the law, the implementation part from the relevant government agencies, as I think Helena was saying, we must walk the talk. So when you talk about the private sector, they have their own responsibility, but also the responsibility of governments to impose those rules and regulation. I'm also attracted by the comments of the mayor of Kuala Lumpur of establishing the low carbon center in the city. I think this is a very good move, but I also would like to encourage that the private sector got to play a very big role. And here again, I return to my earlier thesis about the need for a dialogue involving multi-sectoral stakeholders throughout the board. Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you very much. Mayor, you're in the panel still, I believe, and still available for a follow-up question. So let me turn to you. There's been some discussion also in the chat about the role of urban spaces, public urban spaces, green spaces, for health benefits, for social benefits. Can you talk a little bit about how you see the role of green spaces, and then address Dr. Zakhri's question as well about how you're working with private sector to increase social responsibility across the board?
Thank you for the questions. Now in Kuala Lumpur, we have seen that some kind of new hobby or new lifestyle. People like to go back. People like to have their own activities in the park. On last Sunday, I can see there are a few families members having picnic after they have done some exercise in the park. There are a lot of people now utilizing parks as place for them to, not only for them to go for recreation, but also I think the way they treat it as a place to meet friends, probably other family members. It's a kind of very warm kind of relationship with people. So the park that we are having in Kuala Lumpur, especially, we really maintain it, and we are having nice, not only trees and flowers. The infrastructure, to me, is a complete infrastructure where you can run, you can jog, you can also do cycling. And I would like to mention this here, we are also getting very good support from the business community, property developers. They are coming back to us to bring some, to plant new trees, to plant trees with a lot of new flowers. We are doing it because we want the parks in the city to have their own attraction. They create a unique parks where we can see plants of various species. So by having that, I think will attract more people to come and visit our parks. And I see parks, again, it's a place where you can recreate and make you healthy, more healthy. Now, in Kuala Lumpur, at the northern part of Kuala Lumpur, we have 7 big ex-mining ponds, and all these ponds has been converted to metropolitan parks. And these 7 metropolitan parks, we are linking, we are connecting it among that seven lakes. So there's another option. There's another new facilities will be ready soon for the KLites to utilize it. Again, as I said, parks is very important for the city to offer places for the residents to improve their health, to use this as a place to probably to enjoy themselves for their own recreational purposes. And as I said, for the family members to meet and the friends also to actually come as a meeting places. So I really hope that everyone in Kuala Lumpur to, of course, I can see that the sentiment is very strong, to really take care of the park. Take care of the park so that we can together use it for the benefit of everyone. That is to improve the quality of life of citizens of Kuala Lumpur. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you very much, Mayor, again. We're coming to the end of this session, so I would like to ask the remaining speakers following the Mayor to give us a very brief 30-second recommendation that would really elevate the role of health and focus on health in urbanization and urban planning. So what, again, is your recommendation going forward for better integrating health in our urban development? Town Planner Herlina, if you would go first, please. Very briefly.
Thank you. The question is how we integrate health in urban planning. Health is part of social needs. That is the basic needs of the people. There are many other implications of development. If it is not well planned or not controlled, will affect the health of the people. That is why we in Malaysian Association of Social Impact Assessment, we are stressing the importance of social impact assessment. Social impact assessment is something new to the country. It's only about 15 years. And we only have it in our the Act of 172, Town and Country Planning Act in 2017. So it's relatively new. And I would like to have this social impact assessment to take care of health impacts on the people by the project proponents. So we want project proponents to be willingly do a social impact assessment so health impact can be properly assessed before they start the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sahani, very briefly, your final thoughts here.
Okay, thank you, Akad. I think we need to advocate more public participation to come together for environmental protection. Because to me, as a public health specialist, prevention is better than cure. And we need to have more improvement in terms of air quality management and also water quality and also waste management, especially in the urban cities. Yeah, thank you. And again, health is very important to have health policies in all sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Zakri, over to you for your final comments.
Yes, thank you again, Chair. I agree with all those issues raised by colleagues, but let me remind ourselves, it's true that socio-economic impact is crucial. Health is crucial, but we must turn full circle, and that is to respect the integrity of nature. After all, if we look at what is happening now, COVID-19 is the result of habitat destruction. So that is the essence of sustainable development, right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I'm going to need to close the session. But I think what has really been highlighted is that the pandemic has not, it was highlighted early on that this is not the first pandemic that we've dealt with, but the pandemic has really highlighted the role of health in urban issues and urban development. There were issues of growth inequality mentioned early on, of environmental degradation, of the notion of health and economic growth. But I think going forward, the whole basis for building back better really is urban and territorial planning that could include quality of life targets that address things like air pollution, zoonoses, diseases, pollution, and other issues. So thank you all very much for a very robust discussion. Thank you for those who were active in the chat. And I will turn the program back over to the facilitator.
Thank you, Mr. Garrigan. Ladies and gentlemen, that marks the end of High Level Dialogue 3 for today. And please do not leave just yet once we are at the backstage, because we would like to take a few photos for reporting purposes. And I would like to thank to all the panelists for the insightful dialogue today. And it was such a great pleasure to have you all here today. We will be back again after this with Business Leaders Roundtable in 2 hours' time. See you all there. Bye-bye.